Hello everyone, this is Siege of Alexandria, 48 BC, from the Caesar Civil War. Getting over the flu, as I've said before, so you just have to bear with it. I'm feeling a lot better, but until I'm completely better, then I'm not better. Words of wisdom.
It had now been approximately a year and a half since Caesar made the fateful decision to cross the Rubicon. In that time, he had forced the Optimate faction out of Italy and conquered the peninsula, defeated the Republic's best army in Spain, and had now defeated the Republic's greatest general, Pompey, at Pharsalus. But civil wars, by their nature, demand a total victory, and Caesar still had a way to go to accomplish this goal. And unfortunately for him, in this episode he will not take steps to finish the war, but will be dragged into a civil war of another state. Badass champions, tough bosses, millions of players. The sponsor of today's video, Raid Shadow Legends, has all of that, but it also has a ton of depth. As soon as you get in game, all this treasure will be waiting for you here. Throughout Caesar's campaigns in Greece, he had continued to levy legions elsewhere, adding the 31st, 32nd and 33rd to his ranks. Following the Battle of Pharsalus, he also inducted some of Pompey's surrendered men into his army, making the 34th, 35th, 36th and 37th legions. Caesar, by this stage of the war...
Did I see Cleopatra down there? Caesar didn't have a relationship with Cleopatra, right? Who the hell was that? Was that Mark Antony? Am I wrong?
Now had the numerical advantage. But the Optimate faction still harboured some of the most influential politicians of the day. The war was far from over. Caesar's first priority after the Battle of Pharsalus...
Stupid question. I know that they could pick you to... Pick you. Okay, they vote you to be like a dictator for like 6 months. I have to assume it's been way past the 6 months for Caesar. Did he just say, yeah, I'm just going to stay head of all this? It's the only thing I can think of, and it just popped into my head. So, apologize for asking 13 videos in?
was Pompey himself. He immediately left in pursuit, leaving Antony to oversee the political situation in Rome.
Mark Antony.
It was the time of year where the elections for next year's consul would usually be decided, and Caesar's term as consul of the year 48 BC would be coming to an end.
I seriously had no idea that they were going to say that right after I unpaused it. That's weird. I should buy a lottery ticket. No. You guys should buy a lottery ticket and give me the winnings, right? And I'll give you 2.5% back. But if you make a big stink, I'll give you 3. Huh? Great
Caesar
deal.
would entrust Antony with ensuring that his political power continued. Having picked up on Pompey's trail through informants in Asia Minor, Caesar pursued Pompey to Egypt with a fleet of 10 Rhodian ships, as well as a few more from Asia Minor. On board were 2 legions, the 6th and...
I don't like that. Asia Minor. Why do you need kids? That's ridiculous.
27th, totaling just around 3,200 infantry, as many soldiers as had been lost to war and illness over the years, and 800 cavalry. Caesar only learned of his ex-triumvir's death upon his arrival in Alexandria at the start of October 48 BC, just a few days after Pompey's death. According to Plutarch and Cassius Dio, when Caesar was first presented with Pompey's head, he turned away disgusted. He was next presented the seal ring of Pompey, at which point Caesar broke down in tears. Both historians interpret this grief differently. Plutarch claims that it was genuine. After all, though enemies in later life, Caesar and Pompey had been political allies for around 8 years, had effectively ruled Rome together, and had even been related by marriage. Dio, on the other hand, claims that this grief was only for show, and that Caesar had always hated Pompey from the start. It is impossible to say which is true. However, it is likely that Caesar was incredibly frustrated at Pompey's death. Caesar had a genius for public relations.
Sorry, my phone just keeps going off. I apologize.
Capturing Pompey, forcing him to renounce the Senate, and then pardoning him, as was Caesar's habit, would have been the ultimate coup de grace. Instead, Pompey's assassination made him a martyr for the optimate cause, something Caesar would have surely wished to avoid.
I'm listening, but I have to do something real fast, so I'm still listening.
In Rome, however, Antony was able to capitalize on news of Pompey's death. Many in Rome had refused to believe that Pompey had been defeated, but upon being presented with Pompey's ring, which Caesar had sent to Rome, they finally accepted that the old general was lost and was dead. Rome now acclaimed Caesar as the victor, bestowing countless honors on him. Seizing upon the situation, Antony labeled the Pompeians in Africa as
many in Rome had refused to believe that Pompey had been defeated. Wow. Because Pompey was older, so did they believe that being older, he was maybe the more established or more alpha of them both? I don't know. How do you say it? I said Anthony, but that's not right. Antony labeled the Pompeians in Africa as conspirators. Wait a minute. Maybe he wasn't the one that got with Cleopatra then. If he's talking about them in Africa. I don't know. Why am I pausing it? Sorry.
Conspirators, declared a national emergency and that a dictator was needed. The man chosen to be dictator was, of course, Caesar. Rather than the regular 6 months, his term as dictator was also set at 1 year, running through October 47 BC. In return for his continued loyalty and effectiveness, Antony was named by Caesar as Master of Horse, effectively his second in command, and was entrusted with the governance of Italy and Rome in Caesar's absence.
Quick question for you. Do you know how much you actually weigh? Well, this might sound crazy, and it's actually a little disgusting, to be honest. And a lot of people have to deal with it every day. But according to
Master of Horse. What a title.
Many Optimate politicians, such as Gaius Cassius, now returned to Rome and appealed for forgiveness from Caesar. All were spared and welcomed into the new regime. Cicero also returned to Rome and was forgiven. He returned to the Senate, where he hoped to use his influence to do what he could to preserve the Republic. With Caesar,
I'm going to guess by that it's not necessarily to be on Caesar's side, but to look at the country as a whole.
In Egypt, now being a dictator, he decided to turn his attention to Roman interests in the area, namely the rulership of the kingdom and its debt to Rome. As we have seen, Egypt was ruled by the boy pharaoh Ptolemy XIII. The pharaoh's father, Ptolemy XII, had made an alliance with Rome during Caesar's tenure as consul in 60 BC. Before his death, Ptolemy XII named his eldest son, Ptolemy XIII, and his eldest daughter, Cleopatra VII, as co-rulers, with Rome as the guarantor of the will. Tensions between the two sibling rulers quickly escalated, however, both raising armies against each other. Furthermore, Both had inherited the debts of their father. Ptolemy XII had borrowed huge sums of money from Rome throughout his life, and by his death, there was still an unpaid debt of 17.5 million drachmae to the Republic, which constituted approximately half of Egypt's yearly revenue. Caesar was badly in need of money to pay his growing armies, and also saw an opportunity to solidify Roman influence in the area. As consul when the alliance with Egypt was first made, and the current dictator, Caesar thought it his obligation to see that pro-Roman rule in Egypt was maintained and that the debt was paid. Caesar first attempted to take a diplomatic approach, suggesting that Ptolemy and Cleopatra both disband their armies and that he act as an arbitrator to see their father's will fulfilled. He also requested the debt be paid, but was willing to reduce it to 10 million drachmae. Ptolemy, though pharaoh by title, was still young, and as such, was being advised by a council who effectively ruled Egypt through their regency. Pothinus, a eunuch, was one of the most influential of these advisors. It had been on his advice that Pompey had been assassinated as a ploy to curry favor with Caesar. Now he opposed Caesar's suggestions. He saw Caesar's arrival as a threat to royal authority, and initially refused to pay the debt. He even went so far as to bring Ptolemy's royal army into Alexandria under the command of Achilles, one of Pompey's killers. This was clear defiance of Caesar's demands that Ptolemy's armies be disbanded, and in response, Caesar sent messengers to Cleopatra, perhaps thinking she would be able to better fulfill his demands without requiring a regent. Cleopatra decided to meet Caesar in secret within Alexandria. Plutarch gives an extraordinary account of this meeting, in which Cleopatra, with the help of her right-hand man Apollodorus, smuggles herself into the city in a bed sack, laundry bag, or carpet. Cassius Dio gives the much more reasonable account that the two simply met in secret with no reference to her being smuggled in. Both sources, however, agree that Cleopatra was quickly able to seduce Caesar. Cleopatra is described as being beautiful, charming, and above all, clever. She was a brilliant orator and could speak as many as 8 languages, and was the first Ptolemaic ruler to learn Egyptian. Caesar immediately tried to reconcile the two monarchs, proclaiming them co-monarchs, and offering the island of Cyprus, recently annexed from the Egyptians by Rome, to the other two siblings, Arsinoe and Ptolemy XIV, thus removing other potential claimants to the Egyptian throne. Pothinus, however, was not happy with this agreement. He was worried that, due to Cleopatra's now very close relationship with Caesar, she would be the more powerful of the two siblings, and that Pothinus would, as a result, lose his influence. He began stirring up unrest in the city, even having gold from the temples and royal treasury melted down in a deliberate attempt to show Caesar as being extortionate. With the situation worsening, Caesar sent emissaries to Achilles and the Egyptian army, attempting to explain that he only wanted to be an arbitrator of the will, as was his legal right. These emissaries were killed on Achilles' orders. The message was clear: a fight was imminent. Caesar was aware that he did not have enough men to fight in the open, only having the 4,000 he had brought from Greece. Instead, he ordered his men to seize the royal quarters where he had been housed. Within these quarters were Cleopatra, Pothinus, Arsinoe, and the boy pharaoh Ptolemy himself. Having taken control of the pharaoh, Caesar awaited Achilles' next move. Achilles' army numbered around 20,000, plus a further 2,000 cavalry, all experienced veterans. Their number...
I wouldn't think your cavalry is going to help you much on what looks to be like urban warfare. But, I mean, I don't... The infantry, yeah. But I don't know.
Were swelled still further by the rioting Alexandrian citizens and even slaves who aligned with the army and took up arms, making a kind of militia. Things were descending into chaos, and Caesar was forced to begin further fortifying his position, and to send messengers to allies and his forces in Asia Minor requesting reinforcements. What had started as a simple political mission had now devolved into a siege.
Now this isn't scientific, but I did a poll around New York, and what people believed about the Constitution shocked me.
I think the U.S. is...
Constitution ain't real. It's what people told me.
Achilles' army occupied the majority of the city to the west, including the Euanstos harbour, while Caesar only held the royal quarters and the royal harbour. Achilles regularly attacked Caesar's position, probing for weaknesses, but the narrow streets helped mitigate the difference in numbers, Caesar's men consistently repulsing these attacks. Achilles next turned his attention to the great harbour where both the Egyptian fleet and Caesar's fleet lay at anchor. If Achilles could seize this harbour and the ships, he would be able to cut off any chance of Caesar being resupplied or receiving reinforcements. Sending a
or even leaving. If you get the harbor, you pretty much have control of the ships, correct? What's he going to do, swim?
diversionary force to attack Caesar's defences. Achilles simultaneously sent a larger force to seize the harbour. Caesar was well aware of the strategic value of the harbour, and so, leaving as small a force as was necessary to hold the defences, he led his men to the harbour. The fighting around the harbour was particularly brutal, and Caesar quickly realised he did not have enough men to win this fight and defend the harbour. Instead, Caesar effectively fought a delaying action, holding off the Egyptian force long enough for his men to set fire to the Egyptian fleet and pull their own fleet back to the royal harbour. The fire was ferocious and
there's a royal harbour too, huh? Alright.
spread quickly, partially burning the great library of Alexandria. The damage was relatively minor, fortunately, and the library would continue for a number of centuries afterwards. Seizing the opportunity of having naval supremacy, Caesar sailed a portion of his men to the island of Pharos, which controlled access to all Alexandria's harbours, establishing a small garrison there, likely around the promenade on which the lighthouse itself was situated. Caesar and the rest of his forces then retreated back to the royal quarters. While Caesar persisted in improving his defences, Pothinus continued his resistance from the inside. Secretly, he sent messages to Achilles encouraging him to continue his attacks and plotted to assassinate Caesar. Caesar's men, however, were able to catch some of Pothinus's messengers, who were forced to reveal the plot. Caesar immediately had Pothinus killed. Arsinoe, Ptolemy's sister, had greater success, escaping Caesar's defences and joining Achilles. Following this, an uneasy status quo developed. Caesar continued to fortify his position against any assaults, even making makeshift battering rams to break down the walls of houses to keep a continuous line of defence. The Alexandrians also constructed their own barricades to keep Caesar penned in, some as high as 12 meters. Achilles frequently sent some of his militia forces to assault various points of Caesar's defences to look for weakness, keeping his veterans in reserve, but with little success. Perhaps frustrated by this lack of success, a rift began to form between Arsinoe and Achilles, and eventually Arsinoe had Achilles killed and replaced by her own man, Ganymedes. Ganymedes was a cunning general and immediately took steps to try and break the stalemate. Alexandria was supplied by subterranean watercourses that ran throughout the city. Ganymedes, therefore, ordered that those sections that flowed into the parts of the city controlled by Caesar be blocked, and then had these sections polluted with seawater, rendering them undrinkable. Such a tactic would have been difficult to pull off, but the Alexandrians were renowned engineers and were quickly able to complete the project, thus making Caesar's position even more precarious. Some of Caesar's men started to panic, some saying that they should have retreated much earlier. Fortunately for them, Caesar took control of the situation. He made it clear that if they were to attempt to retreat, the Alexandrians would catch them before they could successfully evacuate everyone. He instead ordered wells to be dug day and night, and fresh water was soon found, avoiding disaster. Though the situation had been quickly rectified, it was clear that Ganymedes was a dangerous enemy, not to be taken lightly. In the next episode of our series, Caesar will continue.
Wow. And that's the thing. I didn't even think about a well. I was thinking, yeah, they're going to have to get out. You're going to have to escape somehow. But how do you do it? You can't just have a mass exodus. They'll just run after you. Wow. Digging a well. Now, by poisoning the well with salt, poisoning the water flow, the channels or whatever, with seawater, that wouldn't do any long-term damage, right? I mean, you could just kind of flush that out, I would think. You wouldn't obviously want that in, but you could flush that out after they were gone. I'm hoping, because otherwise that was stupid. Although it was smart. Stupid. It was smart, but it was stupid, but it's smart. But if it's long term, it was stupid. But it was smart. See, I can keep going. Well, I'm going to end this here. And I'm going to do another video. You keep watching. Like, subscribe. Sit back. Every time you watch my videos, sit back. Relax. Just enjoy it. Have a good day. Have a good night.